The truth has been suppressed for centuries. When we consider that we are taught from a very young age to believe what is put in front of us and not question authority, it is easy to see that our minds can be manipulated to believe in false ideas and fall for hidden agendas. When you start to look at things with an open mind and question the things that you have been forced to believe, you soon see the truth has been buried with a smokescreen of deceit and lies. It is important to understand that this is just my opinion on mine and other people's vast research. I encourage you to do your own research and find your own truths. There is so much to sift through, but always trust your senses. If things are too good to be true, they usually are. Research has led me to the conclusion that even the very foundations of our knowledge of where we are and who we are has been falsified with theory upon theory, which is then taken as fact. Let's see how far the rabbit hole goes. My perilous journey began with the 9/11 attacks. 9/11 is a major red flag. There are far too many anomalies and obvious coincidences which occurred for it to have been what the mainstream media portrayed. After looking into the testimonies of eyewitnesses, construction engineers and safety inspectors, it became very clear that the towers were removed demolition style, using thermite on the steel skeleton of the buildings, along with some explosives that were clearly heard and felt by eyewitnesses, not to mention the random unlinked destruction of Building 7 at the same time caused by a single level fire, or the plane that was shot out the sky with no trace of any plane parts in the debris field, or the completely missing plane and parts when one apparently flew into the side of the Pentagon, with video evidence showing no plane hit it, only a small explosion. The fact that there were numerous training exercises of this exact scenario and others all ran on this same day at the same time. This undoubtedly was an inside job. Please research and see for yourself. There are not just breadcrumbs left to find, there are entire bakeries. It is clear that they are not afraid to lie to the masses so blatantly on such a massive scale, and they actually get away with it. I questioned things about the wars across history. After all, it was the same governments and mainstream medias that have been caught lying. This was a real eye-opener. To see how easily they have manipulated not only the people but entire countries and governments in such a strategic way that there was clearly an overall agenda. They started by removing anyone from power that couldn't be manipulated and used as a puppet, first by persuasion or payment. If this didn't work, by assassination. JFK is a clear example of this, though I also believe he was silenced as he was ready to tell the masses the massive lie that we have yet to discuss. If they cannot be reached, then by invasion. Saddam Hussein is a perfect example of this. They tried and failed at the first two stages, so a simple lie and scare tactic about fake WMDs, and voila, the whole world are behind the criminals to invade. This is what happened to so many countries, almost all, and they are still at it. There was no need to invade unless there is a high level of resources such as oil. Instead, they sent agents in to infiltrate and manipulate the local governments piece by piece. A resource like oil has to be manually maintained and controlled by the powers that be, but countries that merely needed to be enslaved by the central banks did not require a forceful takeover. Simply infiltrate, manipulate and fool into borrowing money for the newly crumbling economies and install a central bank which are ran by the elites. Some of these agents have come forward and discuss in detail the strategic takeover of many countries. Now of course we have the war on terror, again based on a lie, being the 9/11 attacks and more recent attacks to keep the scare tactic alive. This is a whole new ball game for them. It has created a never-ending permanently funded machine that keeps us at war. It allows the governments to send its armies anywhere and keep vast areas, the people and resources within it under military control. They are fighting against the militias that they created. That alone should raise a few flags. This tactic will continue until their agendas are reached, as a war on terror can never be won. There have been more terror attacks and deaths prior to 9/11, the London bombings and other attacks of recent. Yet no dictator was chased, no Bin Laden was fingered as the head of it all and hung up to dry, no war was declared. All this new terrorism was initially falsified and they pointed the finger. These accused then only retaliate to the locally militarized areas of their own countries and will continue to do so. This has created a false mindset in the masses. On one side you have the scared public hoping not to become a number in another tragedy with the necessity for a government for the protection. On the other side you have the falsely accused and invaded now angry people willing to retaliate to the countless bombings which have killed countless of their innocent women and children. All caused by a political, money and power-driven agenda. I have mentioned they a lot of times. Who are they, you ask? They are the elites, the so-called globalists. Whoever run the banks hold the money and rule the world, whether we like it or not. It's the simple truth. Money is power. The elites have falsified our history, manipulated our governments and the people into broad daylight slavery. The monetary system itself is a self-perpetuating tool which keeps the governments and therefore the people in debt. The government borrow the money from the privately owned central banks who have created the money from thin air. This initial transaction carries a debt per dollar or pound. The banks then have to pay back that initial borrowed money with interest. But the debt still hasn't been paid for, so they borrow more money to pay for the debt of the first transaction, which in itself creates more debt and more interest. And so on. This enslaves the governments and local banks and therefore the people. As long as there is a monetary system, we will never be free, as the debt can never be paid for. Another area of research which finds more lies and deceit is that all natural medicines and all things good are supras. Said from us, their pharmaceutical drugs, besides being worth billions, only keep us ill, as in the long run they do not cure us. All major diseases are clearly man-made. It is a perfect business plan for the sadistic lunatics: create a virus in a poor area, let it spread slightly, killing a few hundred people, firstly keeping the population of the unprofitable people down a little, and secondly using the controlled media outlets to create a worldwide scare tactic. Create a vaccine, force it on the people of this area, stopping it from spreading and becoming the scientific hero. Then use these media outlets again to prolong the scare tactic by falsifying a few people that slip through the net. Thus creating the demand for the vaccine in all possible affected countries, making billions in profit whilst actually endangering the people with chemicals never fully tested over a long-term period. Heard of Ebola recently? This is a prime example of these effective tactics. Previously the tactics were not as easily controlled. I believe these instances to be like the Spanish flu, AIDS and HIV. Cancer has been proven to be curable with natural remedies, yet obviously suppressed as there is no profit on freely available cures. The cells exist in all of us, it is triggered by chemicals we consume that they feed us. The current solution is to kill all the cells. This uncontrolled method of course kills many healthy cells, causing us to get very ill, and the success rate is awful. All this is unfortunately just the tip of the iceberg, and it is time to dig a little deeper down the rabbit hole. I began to research into government operations such as Operation Paperclip, Operation Fishbowl, Operation Deep Freeze and Operation High Jump. These are all documented and are available to research. Richard Berg was an explorer who had been to the North Pole on many expeditions. His diary and first-hand accounts from these visits to the North are very intriguing. He was then sent to explore Antarctica. There is a very interesting interview where he tells of vast areas of untouched land with an abundance of resources that would settle the world's apparent energy crisis indefinitely. It is worth a watch. He was made an admiral of the Navy and sent back to Antarctica as the lead body of Operation High Jump. This was a military operation which involved 4,000 men, boats, ships, planes and equipment, carried out just after the Second World War. There are rumors that there was a large battle which they lost. Even Admiral Byrd apparently has spoken of flying craft that travel at tremendous speeds unknown to the technology of even today. This cannot be confirmed, and so in my opinion is just left for one to speculate. This operation is shrouded in mystery, and you have to question, why did they send such a force to an apparent uninhabited land mass? After Operation High Jump, they created the Antarctic Treaty. This has been signed peacefully by over 50 countries to prevent any claim of land and stops any independent exploration. We can obviously go on a very expensive excursion to visit the penguins on the islands and some shores, but no one is allowed to go deep inland. Not even the scientists based there. We are told the reason we cannot go to the actual South Pole is that it's very hard to get there and is impractical, even with today's technology, and there is no point anyway as there is nothing to look at. Instead they created a ceremonial South Pole which is nowhere near the so-called magnetic South, with flags of the signed countries for tourists to awe at its achievement. This smokescreen is oddly similar to the North Pole, except they tell us there is simply nothing there except oceans which freeze over, yet you will not be allowed to take a ship or fly there to see for yourself. Operation Fishbowl consisted of countless nuclear rocket tests sent straight up into the sky, apparently to determine how nuclear weapons reacted with the atmosphere. It was part of a larger operation called Operation Dominic, which involved large-scale nuclear experimentation. Though again only speculation, you have to ask, what actually happened in Antarctica, what did they find and who, or what did they encounter that led them to carry out such frantic experiments and keep us from ever going there ourselves? Byrd talks of thousands of miles of unknown land past the supposed South Pole unseen by man. Going back to his expeditions in the north, he spoke about mountain ranges and lush green land and warm lakes as he has now in Antarctica. How is this possible on a globe? The name Operation Fishbowl also raised my suspicions. There have been many ancient maps found that show northern lands surrounded by mountain ranges and a magnetic mountain at the center. This confirms Byrd's writings on his journey to the north. Modern maps simply show sea and ice covering the region. Were all the ancient maps wrong, or has the powers that be hidden these lands? If so, why? There are many ancient tales now believed to be referring to the northern lands. The ancients called it Shambhala, Mount Meru, the Tree of Life, some say even Eden from the Bible. The perilous map was created copying many ancient maps hundreds of years ago showing the coast of Antarctica ice-free. This map has undergone much scrutiny, and using ground-penetrating radar, scientists have confirmed the map is overwhelmingly accurate. How is this possible? The ice is said to be millions of years old and a few miles thick, baffling scientists who have no answer explaining the map's existence. This to me proves there are many aspects of our history as unknown and many known areas are suppressed. The government operations led my research back to the Second World War, which again is shrouded with hidden agendas and smoke screens. I will leave this for you to investigate, as this one is very controversial to discuss. Just remember that the victors write the history books. As the war was ending came Operation Paperclip. This was an operation which the American government employed thousands of Nazi scientists and engineers, bringing them into the country and utilizing the superiority in engineering and rocketry. One of those engineers was Wernher von Braun. He became the lead aerospace rocket engineer for NASA along with others. I began to look into NASA, which brought me to look at, study and inevitably question the moon landings as many others have. After looking at vast research made by others and carrying out my own, hearing and seeing testimonies of engineers, camera specialists, even former astronauts, and above all rusting my senses, it was clearly faked and filmed right here on Earth. With not so subtle camera trickery, image doctrines, a vast array of anomalies during the apparent flight on the moon, the landing and takeoff of the lunar module and the lunar module itself, it is very clear that this was one of the biggest lies ever portrayed. Seems far-fetched, I know, but please have an open mind and do your own research. It won't take you long to see through the lies, as they are so blatant. My trust for NASA and the other establishments involved were forever lost. Knowing that NASA lied to the world about the biggest achievement mankind had ever supposedly achieved, we have to question everything they portrayed. After all, would you trust a known liar? Surely you would at least question what they tell you. Well, I and many others have done just that. We have questioned everything they told us, and it turns out yet again, we have been lied to. Only this time it is the mother of all lies within the known history. You have to ask why lie? A liar lies because they are hiding something and continues to, as they don't want the truth to be heard, seen or found. With this simple question in mind and in-depth research of how the heliocentric model, gravity, the Big Bang and other things that are taught as fact came about, it became clear that the wool has been pulled over our eyes, and so many aspects of actual science, repeatable provable experiments about our world have been suppressed, manipulated and indoctrinated for hundreds of years. And the truth-seeking scientists ridiculed and silenced as they scraped against the grain of the elite's agendas, only to be replaced by theories upon theories and notions upon notions still not proven to this day, pressured into belief by the Masonic, sadistic hierarchy. I did warn you about this rabbit hole. So heliocentrism, fact or theory? Well, it is based on a theory, and only other theories build its totality. The heliocentric model replaced a perfectly working geocentric model that had been believed the world over for thousands of years. This model did not need theories, it merely needed observation and the trust of one's own senses. For instance, right now at the equator you are told that you, along with the air around you, is spinning 1,000 miles an hour, yet the Coriolis effect says that a bullet once left the barrel of a gun has effectively left the attachment of Earth's spin and moves separately to the rotation, yet a hot air balloon or a helicopter cannot simply hover in the sky and wait for its destination to arrive below it. An airplane does not crash during every attempt to land due to the runway traveling away or toward it. An invisible, unproven, untestable force called gravity is keeping you firm on the ground, the atmosphere from being sucked out into the vacuum of space, and the Earth itself is spinning around a gigantic mass ball of nuclear fusion, all hurtling around a galaxy of billions of stars in an endless vacuum of expanding space, which is filled with an undetectable mass of dark matter governing the entire universe, which all started from a big explosion of nothing. All theory, no fact, only our trust in the scientific establishment and what and they are told to believe, only then make it a fact in the minds of the many. If you remove the lying, falsified crap that the Freemasons, elites and NASA and other space agencies have shoved down our throats, all we have to go by these outrageous, unproven claims. Claims of which that we are told were the leading thoughts of the masses for hundreds of years, some say even thousands, when in fact, the heliocentric and post-theories were all ridiculed, but inevitably won over the masses by perpetual persistence of the elites and Freemasons. Copernicus, though not actually the founder of the heliocentric model but was placed center stage for it just as the sun worshippers place their idols center stage in their model, he was a Freemason. Isaac Newton, though himself couldn't prove and had issues with his theory of gravity, especially with the apparent moon's authority over our oceans but not lakes and rivers, he was a Freemason. Albert Einstein, who picked at Newton's faults and when confirmed the theory of gravity didn't work, he came up with another theory, which again he later found to have large flaws, thus creating a new theory TAR. T basically prevents further questioning due to its conclusions all based on a false foundation. I believe he was either another Freemason or a Jesuit. Again, don't believe me, research it for yourself. So how do you explain things like gravity, satellites, the sun and moon, etc.? The truth is I don't have all the answers and many can speculate on what this place is, how it was formed and how it all works. What I do know is that instead of satellites, there are deep-sea cables put in place to connect the world, the first of which was the Trans-Pacific Cable 1, installed and completed on June 19, 1964, linking Japan with USA via Hawaii. This was coaxial cable or telephone cable. This first was followed by countless more and they have never stopped, the newest of which will be complete in 2020 called the Jupiter Cable System. This will be the most powerful and fastest yet with data speeds at 60 terabytes per second. This 14,000 kilometers long cable will connect Japan, USA and the Philippines. Customers and investors include Amazon, Facebook and many others. These are all documented and researchable, just not pushed into mainstream media and therefore not common knowledge. Why would they need to physically install and spend billions on cable installation to connect the world, when we supposedly have 2,271 satellites above our heads constantly without a fault providing connectivity? The idea of a satellite was created in a publication by a science fiction author called Arthur C. Clarke. Not long after, we were apparently pumping them out into space by the thousands in perfect, ever-perpetual freefall, otherwise known as in orbit. Orbiting the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour in the 2,500 degrees centigrade area of our atmosphere, aptly named the thermosphere. Without the theory of gravity, the heliocentric model literally falls apart and the idea of a globe Earth becomes impossible. This would explain the lies of NASA and the meaning for its inception after Operation Fishbowl and the necessity for the Antarctic Treaty. Instead of gravity we have density and buoyancy. After all, if the Earth isn't a spinning ball almost entirely covered with magically bending water, and is a flat, motionless, purposeful plane, just as our senses and the highly advanced ancients tell us, there is no need for magic. Anything denser and heavier than air will stay on the ground, and when things fly, jump or are thrown up they inevitably return to the ground. What goes up must come down. Anything that is lighter than air will rise, such as a helium balloon, or pockets of heated air such as hot air balloons, simply defying the wonderful gravity. The Sun is said to have been many different distances over the years on the current model, with many ideas such as 63 million, 113 million, and now thought to be 93 million miles away, and yet with this slight 23.4 degree tilt we are told Earth to have, we get our vastly different seasons. Side note, 23.4 degrees away from our straight 90, leaves 66.6 degrees, 666. I will leave that there, but suffice to say there are plenty of sixes used within the mass of the sun-worshipping heliocentric model. We are also told the Earth is further away from the Sun by over 1 million miles during our summers, and that much closer during our winters. When you stop to think about this, it simply does not make any sense and confirms that modern science is a religion. Faith has to be implied to believe in such nonsense. I know this is hard to digest, but it goes against a lifetime of indoctrination and propaganda to keep the lies alive, but you have to remember that not everyone needs to be in on it. I think this is the big problem with people opening their minds to these things. Surely this is too big a conspiracy to keep under wraps. Well, it actually only takes the top of the pyramid to control the rest. Not all NASA employees know. Clearly not all scientists are in on it. They are all doing the slither of the overall bigger picture, at the computers looking at charts, testing and taking data etc. using the systems put in place which were built based on the theories. They also believe what they have been told and taught, just like us, have been indoctrinated from a very young age. Their entire careers have been following an initial falsity unknown to them, and their works are based on the findings of others that also followed these theories. Each theory glues itself to the previous and forms a papier-mâché ball of imagination. This same scenario goes for all educational bodies which are mandatory and forced upon us to ensure we all continue to be indoctrinated. Anything that the government class as mandatory, i.e. the registration and vaccination of our children, our education, the foods we consume and the taxes we pay, are clearly not within our best interest. Of course teaching our children is very important, but to teach them theory as fact, is criminal. Let's take the core of the Earth in the heliocentric model. Our children are being taught that it's a fact that Earth has a molten iron core spinning, which creates our magnetic field when we have actually only ever drilled 18 miles down before we hit an impenetrable layer that no drill head could cut. True, the idea fits the other theories. That doesn't make it a fact. Mathematics is a language that can be used and manipulated to explain things, but the flaw is the parameters are set by an initial idea or fault. Just because the math fits it doesn't make it true reality. So, who are the ones that do know the lie? The elites, some of the scientists and telemetry engineers, the astronauts stroke not very good actors who are all mostly Freemasons. They don't even cover up their Masonic followings. A very alarming amount of astronauts have died in random freak accidents during normal daily life. Yet not one astronaut has died in the dangerous vacuum of space. These are simply the ones that went against the grain and so were silenced, as were some safety inspectors who questioned the many rocket disasters and failures too much. In some cases even their family members were dealt with to show they are not to be messed with. Again, don't believe me, check for yourself. There is even an entire crew of astronauts that supposedly died during the Space Shuttle Discovery disaster of 1986. All but one of these people have been found to be alive and kicking. Foursome are apparently twins and long-lost brothers or sisters, and O.T.I have the exact same names. There is so much evidence showing lies and deceit it slaps you in the face. A big question that I'm sure you will ask, as well as I asked, is what about all the photos and videos of space, the ISS live feed showing Earth's curve, etc. If you look into all the so-called photos, they are all CGI and or have been falsified. NASA openly tell us that all the imagery of the Earth from space and images of the planets are all composites, apart from the one taken in 1972 on the way to the moon. They say this is an actual photograph. Well, we can scrub that one out, can't we, as they so clearly did not go. NASA consistently tell us that currently they can only go into low Earth orbit. Pictures of the wonderfully colorful galaxies are all artistically rendered based on a very basic unclear black and white composite of blur. The ISS video feed shows a very distorted curve of the Earth which does not go with their own scientific measurements and in fact goes against our senses. The cloud formations seem to be fixed with the falsely looking spin of the Earth below. They don't ever move separately to the land and sea below. Nor do they morph and change shape individually as they do above our heads. The curve they show is definitely fake. There are no stars shown. The feed always cuts out just after or just before sunrises, and the live tracker works based on your PC's time stamp. If you change the time on the computer whilst watching the tracker in real time, it changes its location and path to suit your new time, proving it is just a program. Yes, you can follow the tracker and sometimes see its transit across the sky at night or even the face of the moon, but these transits are usually pushed by NASA and the media so you can prepare to whip out your telescope. Taken into consideration of everything else that is faked, this is an easy one to falsify. That goes with all so-called satellites. Most can be tracked and some seen with the naked eye. Ask yourself, could you see a bus 250 miles away, traveling at 17,000 miles an hour at night, and would that bus be as bright as a star just as these so-called satellites appear to be? People cannot fathom that what they are seeing may not be what they are told. The narrow mind sees what it is told to see, believes what it is told to believe and trusts what it is told to trust. Open your eyes and mind and trust your senses, the truth will flood in. Mainstream scientists repeatedly tell you not to trust your senses, as you're a worthless piece of dust on an other piece of dust in the middle of nowhere, and that science is the truth whether you believe it or not. This is to concrete enforce their own bigotry and belittle the free-minded people. The new planet-finding craze is portrayed as fact, when in actual fact they are merely blips of light. GES on a graph in a lonely room in the vast circus town of NASA. What we see is fantastic CGI images, pushed by the media and the lovely NASA website which give our imagination a boner, and again continue feeding the ever-growing obese lie. So, how do rockets work in a vacuum? Does water curve or does it always find its level? How can we see with the naked eye a speck of light that is trillions of miles away? Why do we see the same stars century after century yet we are hurtling through space and everything is spinning and moving in all kinds of directions? How is it that the North Star, Polaris, is fixed and all other stars revolve around it, never changing their paths, all except the wandering stars or so-called planets as we are told? Ever seen a planet with the naked eye or by telescope? Does it look exactly like the CGI junk we are fed? How is it that Earth's gravity keeps the moon perpetually falling, yet the moon's gravity overcomes the Earth's from 250,000 miles away only to pull our vast oceans creating the tides, yet has no effect on any other body of water such as the vast lakes and rivers or even the much lighter, much closer atmosphere? Surely, Earth's gravity at sea level should be far greater than that of the far-reaching atmosphere. Isn't it convenient that the moon is told to be exactly 400 times closer, yet exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, allowing the wondrous perfect solar eclipses? How is it that with all the motion stated, our moon is in such a perfect synchronized spin with the Earth that we only can ever see the exact same face of the apparent spherical body, never slightly nudging from this by 1 degree, ever? How can we see craters on the moon with the naked eye or with an optical instrument clearly which are a few hundred miles across, yet is 250,000 miles away? Yet you can barely make out a 747 aeroplane traveling at a mere 35,000 feet above. If you were constantly shown photos and videos taken from space showing Australians surfing on upside-down crashing waves, skyscrapers seeming to reach down into the depths of the sky, rain falling upwards to the land, waterfalls and rivers, birds, planes, cars and animals all moving in this unnatural way, wouldn't it look very odd to you? Wouldn't it go against your senses? Why don't planes have to dip the noses every few miles or so to stay at the same altitude? How does a plane's gyroscope stay perfectly flat on all its axis when traveling around a spinning ball? How can there be an atmosphere surrounded by a vacuum without a container? Surely the air pressure will find equilibrium, just as it does during every experiment ever carried out. We are told that ships disappear over the horizon as they travel over the curve away from you, so how is it that if you bring out a high-zoom camera, you can bring the entire ship back into view? This was one of the first observations which suggested they traveled over a curve. This is simply caused by the visual perspective of the observer. If Earth is a ball, there must be a curve on the x-axis and also on the y-axis, meaning you would never see a flat horizon, yet from sea level all the way to high altitudes the horizon is perfectly flat and always at eye level. How can you see buildings that are so far away in the distance that they should be hidden over the curve, yet they're there, clear to see? We are told that we are seeing a mirage due to atmospheric pressure, so tell me why the view is not inverted and distorted like an actual mirage. This is a poor attempt to pull on the strings that our senses cannot be trusted. A simple test can be done by anyone and has been done by many. On a clear day, choose two areas far away from each other such as a lighthouse on a distant shore or across a large lake, calculate the distance, then calculate the supposed curvature using 8 inches per mile squared and see how far behind the curve that lighthouse should be. If the calculation shows that it should be hidden behind the curve, yet you can see it with or without a zoom camera, you simply prove there is no curvature, and just like that, the Earth is not a globe. The mathematics behind this calculation has been confirmed to fit the size and curvature of the theorized globe. Either the size of the globe would have to be much bigger than we are told, or the Earth is flat. Of course, a much larger globe would still have all the same physical problems. Without question, water always finds its level, it can never form to an exterior of any shape, yet if the Earth were a sphere, that would mean thousands of miles of curved water defying its physical properties. Most if not all of high-altitude flight and rocketry always use a fish-eyed lens on their videos and images. This lens distorts the view drastically and shows a very prominent curve. As the camera pans up and down, the curve will warp between being convex and concave. These lenses are always used, as otherwise we would always be shown a flat horizon at all altitudes defying the ball model. This is what I believe they use for the ISS video feed. It is pre-recorded, high-altitude imagery which has been doctored and partly CGI rendered, including the ISS itself. In older feeds it showed the space station's only visible section ridiculously curved, just as the fake spinning images of the Earth behind it. Since the claims of NASA's lies have come to light, they have corrected this and it now shows the visible section of the ISS straight, yet they have not corrected the poor attempt to show a truly curved spinning ball with clouds in their natural motion. Every apparent spacewalk uses this type of lens and the distortions are evident. They have test facilities in massive swimming pools with full-size replicas of the ISS. The water simulates the weightlessness of gravity. There have been many video feeds of the ISS showing bubbles floating about and reflections of light that cannot be explained. This is the simple way they fake spacewalks. Ever watched a full spacewalk? They risk their lives for hours and don't actually do anything. They also never show the astronauts going through the airlocks in and out of space. Don't get me started on the Aurora Borealis or Northern Lights. This is worse CGI than Japan's equivalent to NASA attempt at faking a moon rover. JAXA clearly had a much less budget than NASA's annual $19.3 billion to work with. NASA's recent Epic mission finally showed us the dark side of the moon as it transited in front of the Earth. There are so many issues with this so-called animation of satellite images. It is obvious it is cartoon animation and CGI fakery. They tell us these images were taken over just shy of a 5-hour period on the 16th of July 2017. So I ask, why isn't the Earth and Moon doing the synchronized swim routine through the dark matter of space? The Earth is slightly rotating while the Moon is still. It shows no cloud movement, very few small and no large craters if any on the face of the Moon on this side, no stars and size issues galore. Or the more recent capture of the solar eclipse in August 2017 from the Epic camera aboard the Discovery satellite. These are 12 apparent true color images, this time showing the Earth's gradual turn on each consecutive image and the shadow of the solar eclipse traveling across America. Again, look so fake it is comical. They tell us that this camera takes 20 to 22 pictures of the sunlit side of Earth every day from over 1 million miles away. This amount of images, along with the amount of rotation depicted, would mean that around half a day passes and yet the cloud formations stay perfectly fixed to the rotating ear. throughout all 12 images. In fact, you can go onto NASA's website and see all pictures taken from Epic each day, in the order of which they were taken. None show any changes to the clouds, none show any stars, none show any of the 2,000 plus satellites, none show the ISS or any space debris. Yet some bright spark at NASA has recently discovered that some images show reflections of sunlight bouncing off of orbiting ice crystals. Unfortunately, he indirectly added a few inches to NASA's ever-growing nose. Wouldn't every single satellite in the massive space station all have a blinding reflection of sunlight if a tiny ice crystal can shine bright like a diamond? After all, they apparently do just that from down here on Earth, as we are told we can only see them because they reflect the sunlight. This is yet another cock-up from NASA. You would think that since the lies began in the 60s they would be good at it by now. All these images show is undoubtedly pure fabrication. Go see for yourself. NASA use a remote area of Greenland to carry out tests of the Mars rovers, but when you research the images they magically receive by the rover that's millions of miles away, the landscape is clearly a match to that of the test sites right here on Earth. Why would they use such a remote area for the tests anyway? All they need is a rocky and sandy landscape to test the maneuverability, etc. Is it because they don't want to be seen staging photos by passers-by and to prevent people recognizing known and familiar landscapes on a photo that is supposed DLY on a different planet? How does the rover miraculously survive and clean itself after being pummeled by Mars' gigantic sandstorms, forgetting the fact that it magically traveled there safely through space in the first place? NASA claim they cannot get higher than what they call low Earth orbit with any manned spacecraft due to the immense dangers of the Van Allen radiation belts. How is it that all the satellites sent out into the solar system aren't fried or even slightly damaged when passing such high concentration of radiation? Oh yes, didn't they already go to the moon in 1967? But they were not aware of the belts back then, so it wasn't a problem. They contradict themselves over and over to the point it is embarrassing. They now claim they cannot go back to the moon because they no longer have the technology. They lost all the telemetry data and all the video and audio files of all moon missions and all 6 landings. That sounds awful convenient and very unlikely to have happened by accident. After all, in those days, it would not all be digitally stored and easily deleted. It would be mountains of tapes, documents and manuscripts. How does one go about losing that amount of physical data? They know that with the technology of today, if the tapes and recordings they actually had when present in this mass lie were studied and tested, it would clearly show that the whole thing was staged, so they simply destroyed it, all of it, and wiped their hands with that one. Please watch the press conference of the astronauts after they went to the moon. These heroes of mankind should be over the moon, excuse the pun, yet they act as if they are about to tell their wives that they have cheated on them with a vacuum cleaner. They mumble and stutter through a painful and awkward conference, vaguely answering simple questions with insecurity and confusion. Cyan. These guys just went to the bloody moon and back. Where is the joy, the honor, the enthusiasm? Though the current astronauts are ridiculously poor actors, they have definitely upgraded their acting classes since those days. Please watch a documentary called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. It perfectly shows how easily they falsified the greatest achievement modern man had achieved and pulled the wool over our eyes by falsely confirming that heliocentrism was our reality. Gravity is easily faked using zero-G planes for short videos and boring tricks with water and backflips for that important imagination stimulation, with harnesses which can be made out on clothing movement and by using green and blue screens which show many anomalies and glitches over many videos. From inside the ISS. Watch a high-altitude balloon video without a fisheye lens or with the distortion corrected. You will see a perfectly flat horizon over 100,000 feet high. The curve is faked and shoved down our throats. No matter how odd the curve looks, it goes with what we are told, so no one be others to question it. Yet if we always had seen the true view of a flat horizon during these high-altitude flights, rocket and balloon videos, we would question, where is the curve? Why doesn't the horizon drop down from eye level as it definitely would at these altitudes if we were on a ball? There have been experiments to try and find the motion of the Earth. These have all failed, yet the details are suppressed as usual. Research Aries failure and the Michelson-Morley experiments. The first accurate measurement of the Earth's apparent curvature was done by putting a stick in the ground. In one location at noon, and in another location hundreds of miles away. The shadow on the first stick shows no shadow with the sun directly above. The length of the shadow on the second stick showed that the sunlight was at an angle. Well, this very same experiment explains the sun perfectly on a flat Earth model. As the sun is closer and much smaller than we are told, the sunlight acts as a massive spotlight and therefore creates angled shadows in the distance. We are told that all the water would fall off the edge of the flat Earth. Again, this is a deception that has been drilled into us from a young age. We all remember the picture of the boat in the oceans falling off the flat Earth in our history class, making the ancient beliefs a laughingstock. This is all nonsense. Who said there was an edge? Where's the edge of space? People immediately put the flat Earth within the same cosmology as the heliocentric model, making statements and asking questions like, if the Earth were flat, it would always be daylight. What's on the underside of the Earth? If the Earth were flat, why can't I see the Eiffel Tower from the Statue of Liberty? How is the Earth flat, yet the Moon and planets are spheres? This is a perfect example of the ignorant minds we are molded to have. We are filled up with what we are allowed to know and told anything else is a crackpot idea. But if you ignore some of the things you are told are truths and think for yourself for a change, you will soon see the deceptions. The current flat Earth model is based on the azimuthal equidistant map of the Earth, with the magnetic North Pole in the center of a flat plane. Just take a look at the Gleason map, which in my opinion is the best depiction we currently have of our land's true form until we reach the northern and southern land masses in their entirety and see for ourselves. The UN flag has this map depicted, along with the 33 sections or degrees of the Freemasons. The Gleason map puts all the land masses around the North Pole point, in true locations with minimal distortion unlike the currently accepted NY. The spread used Mercator projection. This projection massively distorts the northern lands and are depicted much larger than the southern regions. This is told to be due to distortions necessary when showing a globe on a flat map. So why is it that Google Earth's globe map matches the Mercator projection even though we are told it is made using satellite imagery? Back to the Gleason's map, the landmass of Antarctica covers the circumference of the oceans holding them in. The Sun, Moon, stars and wandering stars all navigate in circumference around us as if the North Pole is the central axis. As mentioned, this is simply the closest we currently have. There are many ancient maps that are very similar, some even showing many lands beyond the southern ring of Antarctica, which feeds speculation. The Sun works very simply in this geocentric model. It sets and rises into our view simply due to perspective. As it rises, it travels closer and closer till it's directly above our heads at noon and begins its descent as it travels further away from our viewpoint until it is too far to see. This one always gets people, yet we are told that during a sunset, we are spinning away from the sun as it disappears into the horizon. Go watch a sunset, what do your senses tell you is moving? You, the oceans, sky and land all together? Or is it the sun that seems to be moving away? Break through the indoctrination and trust your eyes and other senses. You can see the crepuscular rays of sunlight coming through the clouds at an angle. This shows that the sun cannot be 93 million miles or as by the time the light hits the Earth it is a linear wave. The only way this seems to work is if the light source is much closer and therefore the sun would also be much smaller and not what we are told it is. This is also proven by the spotlight seen above the clouds during high-altitude balloon videos. The sun and moon are potentially of the same size shown by solar eclipses. They take a similar path whilst circumnavigating the flat plane with the sun gently spiraling between its solstices. Take a look at the ancient yin-yang symbol. This depicts this very nicely. How does one circumnavigate a flat Earth? Circumnavigation is achieved by bearing east to west or west to east, but you cannot circumnavigate north to south or south to north. You can of course travel north and south until y hour met by the military forces guarding the lands we are forbidden to see. Again, there is plenty of evidence confirming this, if you take the time to find it. Just like all of this, you will not hear of the stories as they do not make it into the mainstream media outlets ran by the elites. If you look into history of people attempting to circumnavigate the globe north to south, there is literally one guy who attempted it. Now this just wouldn't be the only case. In this world with all the technology we have, people would be flying over Antarctica and the North Pole in an abundance. This is simply falsified a few times, then scare tactics are used, such as immense bad weather and ocean currents in the northern region, super freezing winds in the south. How many people try to achieve the summit of Mount Everest each year? Yet no one wants to go to the actual top of the world on the so-called globe. You are simply not allowed to go to the actual North Pole, just as you are not allowed to go to Antarctica. What you need to ask yourself is why not? All flight paths avoid going the short route over Antarctica or the North Pole. In fact, there are many long-distance flight paths from the southern hemisphere which travel into the northern hemisphere and back to southern, which make absolutely no sense at all. Yet you map those same flights out on an A/E map, and the flight paths make total sense and are straight lines. The same goes for wind and ocean currents. There used to be a website where you could use the program tools to change between the globe and A/E/M. O.T.I.S, showing these different currents. None made sense on the globe map as were scrambled with no form to them whatsoever. All were perfect circles on the A/E map, making total sense. This website has now removed this section of its program. Only the globe maps are now available. There are videos out there showing it before it had changed and have been suppressed to prove what I am saying. If you look up the live flight trackers even on short-haul flights, you will see that the path is curved rather than a straight line. Why would planes fly a gigantic curve when a simple straight Great path would save time and money and make absolute sense even on a globe. Yet you look at these same paths on a flat Earth map and they are straight, which take the shortest possible route. The globe simply does not work practically and physically. It is our faith in what we are told to believe that keeps the deception alive. Yet faith itself is ridiculed in the scientific community when science itself is a religion. What is GPS and how does it work? Do signals really need to bounce all the way up into space and then back down to a receiver, then returning to pinpoint your exact location, or do Google etc. themselves tell us that they use all the ground-based network towers and simply use triangulation? Why is it that if there are thousands of satellites constantly orbiting Earth, do Google openly use high-altitude planes and balloons to form Google Earth and its imagery? If there were satellites covering Earth, why are there many large areas of land that are not shown, and are merely Photoshop? As the same colors of the surrounding lands. The anomalies and nonsensical list is as endless as the theories which make up the model itself. It seems strange to me that people can agree and believe that everything was created from nothing, evolution though still not proven created all known life. Conscious life, and all this is just a mistake, an accident. That the universe is forever expanding and is endless, that there now must be multiverses, i.e. the string theory, to keep alive the deceit. After all, they cannot explain what caused the Big Bang, so another theory has to be established. Yet when someone mentions a possible endless plane of existence, they get angry and upset because it shakes the foundations of the one thing in their lives that they can be sure of. I'm not saying that's what it is, as I have not been there and it has not been proven, but the heliocentric or now EASC centric model, as they now theorize the sun no longer being the center of the universe as the likes of Copernicus had so vigorously stated, has too many flaws and unproven theories that simply go against our senses. From here, all one can do is speculate, but given the mountain of evidence against the current model, it simply cannot be true. Thus we are forced back to the model that the very advanced and well-educated, unindoctrinated ancient people knew to be fact. The world we live in is motionless and flat, and in my opinion has high potential of being much larger than the known areas. The ancients are taught to be looked upon as inferior to us, yet they built bigger, better, longer-lasting structures using skills and technology that we cannot match even today. They created writing, languages, agriculture, music and many other firsts. Yet they are dumb and stupid and were cave dwellers who thought the earth was flat. The Bible and many other ancient writings tell us there is a firmament above our heads, holding the oceans above, the stars and wandering stars within it. This is only as hard to fathom as the heliocentric model, though again not proven but at least written about in ancient times across the known world. There is a very interesting explorer by the name of J.E. Barrington who writes of his fascinating journey to Antarctica, which took him beyond the towering plateau into an unknown ocean, leaving the sun's light behind, yet finding a different source of light in the skies. He comes across an unknown land which is inhabited by people of a Caucasian background, who speak English and know of our lands on the other side of the ice barrier. This land they call the Iron Republic has far superior technology than ours, with clean, fast, fuel-free transport, including a type of train which uses magnetism and travels at hundreds of miles an hour silently and effortlessly. Please note that this publication was written back in the early 1900s and the actual expedition was much earlier when such technology was unheard of. Though not proof, as it is an account of one man and his crew's exploration, this ties in very nicely with the idea that there is much more land beyond the Antarctica, just as Admiral Byrd had stated. Could these be the very same people that Operation High Jump was meant to defeat? Seems likely, but this again is only speculation. This all, however, could not be possible on a globe Earth. There is another very interesting book written by Amedeo Giannini, called Worlds Beyond the Poles. This fascinating book has gone into great detail of the continuity of a level plane of existence and all its components, including the so-called spherical planets. This book states that everything we see is part of a vast plane, whereby the bodies we see in our skies are part of the land and due to our optics and atmosphere appear to be spherical. The atmosphere is continuous across all lands. Heading north and heading south both continue along the plane. This coincides with Admiral Byrd's accounts of the North Pole expedition, as he went further than thought possible on a globe. He believed that he went inside the Earth. This is where the hollow Earth theory came from. Yet if you put his accounts into the light of this model, it shows that he simply traveled further along the plane. Again not proof but definitely worth a read, as it too also fits with a vast plane of existence. It is hard what to believe with all the lies that we have been told, but these are here for us to investigate, speculate and wonder just as we are naturally meant to. I have looked into the ancient civilizations such as the Sumerians and Zachariah Sitchin's fantastic lifelong work. The Sumerians, though not taught about in schools, were the first known documented civilization. They believe and have accounted that a superior race had created them to mine gold for their home's depleting atmosphere. They are called the Anunnaki, which translates to those who from heaven came. This study, which again is suppressed and ridiculed, has been set in the light of the heliocentric model, yet if we put it into the light of the flat plane, could these far superior people be from a distant area of the plane? It is quite likely, if all the so-called UFOs are not our own governments carrying out sadistic testing on the population. Could this simply be our creators? Or other people from surrounding areas of the plane with higher technology, monitoring us, observing and testing, perhaps even controlling us? All speculation, but it is funny how all known anomalies and unknowns can easily fit into this model. To some, this idea may be further fetched than aliens and gods. Yet still possible, as we simply do not know the full truth. As stated before, I do not have all the answers. The resurgence of this investigation is relatively fresh, and yet look at all the anomalies and falsities people have already found. A lot of the research on these subjects have been done by normal people like you and I. These are the people that helped me awaken to it all, so hats off to them. It is amazing to see such a vast amount of people opening their minds and their eyes and trusting what they see and test for themselves. We no longer need the mainstream scientists to tell us what is what. If we just take a look around, note our observations, and above all, trust our senses. Let's back up a little and look at the things that are based on the heliocentric model, because if that is wrong, then a lot of other things are too, such as, if the Big Bang didn't create our universe, then the theory of evolution does not come into play. This is yet another theory that is needed to glue the lie together. Evolution as we have been taught it to be is not proven, has never been witnessed, nor can it be tested and repeated. It is an assumption that makes no sense. A pool of goo which magically formed in our oceans created micro-life, which formed fish in the sea. For some reason these fish tried to get onto dry land for millions of years, which was long enough to grow legs and tails. These reptiles grew into the dinosaur. R.S. Let's just pause there. Firstly, if this were true, the fish would have all died out before ever growing legs, as would have all suffocated, and simply wouldn't need to leave its natural habitat where it would have thrived just as fish do today. Have you ever seen a fish with one leg dead on the beach? No, that's of course ridiculous. Secondly, dinosaurs apparently lived millions and millions of years ago and were wiped out 65 million years ago by an asteroid, vaporizing most of the planet. Even if we stick with the fake heliocentric model for a moment to allow that to be possible, there was no dinosaur bone ever found until the 1800s, ironically, which is just after the theory of dinosaurs was thought up. There are no mention or records or depictions of any dinosaur or fossils in antiquity. Two competing museum owners battled to find these fossils, and lo and behold, they started to miraculously find them everywhere. They became very rich and their museums very popular, so there's the simple answer to their motive for lying. The first bone fossil found was of the Megalosaurus. It was a single fossil of half a tooth. From this, they created and theorized the entire skeleton, size, shape, skin, DNA, etc., from half a tooth. I don't know about you, but even removing the fact that evolution is a theory installed to try and prove another theory which is false, I find it hard to believe that all of a sudden they can find these fossil bones barely deep underground almost everywhere. On a geocentric model, there is no need for magical evolution and dinosaurs. We are told that we evolved from apes, and that our DNA is a 98% match. This has been falsified. Firstly, this percentage is based on only a selection of genomes, and a large percentage of non-matching genomes were ignored as it didn't fit their model. This is not just my opinion, this is fact. Secondly, if evolution were actually real, then why is it that it is only our brains that have evolved to a better status, yet everything else, such as our muscles, bones and skin, have all gone backwards in a so-called evolutionary way? We are weaker and less equipped to withstand our environment. It is only our brains that trump the ape. And why do apes and other animals still exist? They all would have evolved and there would be no original types left. There also will be traces and vast evidence of every stage of this evolutionary tale, i.e. the one-legged fish. Their own theories contradict themselves. Because of this type of indoctrination, evolution is then confused with adaptation. Adaptation is evident everywhere. There are civilizations that live in high-altitude environments and their lungs have slowly adapted to take more oxygen from the thinner air. There are people that have adapted their lungs to hold more oxygen and their muscles adapt to higher pressures to allow PC diving. Humans are not the only ones to adapt. All creeds of animal adapt to its environment over time for survival if needed. It's easy to see by simply swapping the words from evolve to adapt. It changes the fundamentals and leaves behind the need for all the nonsense. So the big question, why? Why have they decided to hide all these truths? What do they gain and what is the agenda? In my opinion, it is rather simple. If you put an animal in a 1,000-acre fenced-off area of fertile land, the animal will thrive peacefully. Put a human in that same area, they will be banging down the fences along the whole perimeter, questioning, wondering what is on the other side, who built the fence and why they have been trapped inside. But if you take that same human and place them on a gigantic ball that no matter which direction you travel, you will end up in the same location as you started, that human will travel a little, but will inevitably settle. It is simply a prison for our minds. There is nowhere to go, just keep your head down, get on with your work, pay those bills and be happy about it. In this enslaved mindset, we are easily manipulated into thinking that resources are scarce, therefore we must pay heavily for them, forced taxation pay. Best to keep you governed and safe from the horrors that are shoved down your throat during every news broadcast, magazine and paper publication. Fluoride in our water is apparently good for your teeth, don't worry that it's poisoning us and dumbing down our brain's true potential. Animals are bred to be eaten, polluting our body with the chemicals they use to keep them relatively healthy in the poor conditions they are kept in. We carry out mass murder of other sentient beings when we can simply live of the fruits of the earth. Cow's milk is told to be necessary for our bones to grow strong, yet it has been proven that as the calcium within the milk is made for cars, our body rejects it and actually causes us to use calcium we already have to break it down to allow our system to accept it. So not only does it reduce our calcium levels, it also brings many other issues such as high dioxin intake and animal hormones. They found that the milk contained a very high percentage of pus, so much so, they had to change the allowable levels that were signed off for human consumption to continue. You can obtain perfect levels of calcium intake from certain nuts and plants. It may have been the case in our past to hunt and kill animals for survival, but we have had the agricultural technology for thousands of years and can feed the entire world at a fraction of the cost without killing animals and polluting our body and our souls. They say we would need to destroy millions of acres of land to grow enough crops to do this, yet due to the ridiculous consumption levels of meat and dairy, something like 80% of our agricultural land is used to feed the animals we bred, simply to slaughter them and eat them. It is utter madness. We are told we are carnivorous, yet our teeth, jaws and digestive system show that to be completely untrue. Ever try biting a cow's ass, ripping off its flesh and gnawing on a nice juicy raw piece of blood-soaked steak with no seasoning? Ooh, yummy. Ever had a raw beef burger, no salad, no ketchup, sauces or relishes? Stop for a second to realize all the lovely flavors come from the seasonings from seeds and plants. We do not need to kill the animals we share this earth with. Wouldn't eat a dog's steak or cat fingers, would you? It's simply what we've been taught is acceptable and we never question it due to our minds at a young age being molded that way. Break free and open your eyes to the world around you. This vast area of fertile land used to grow crops to fatten the animals we eat, kills natural habitats of wild animals. The land is all used up, so they cram us into these tight-knit cities full of crime, pollution and depression. Being in close proximity to other humans with the same mindset triggers greed and anger and selfishness. No one cares about the world because one day we will move to Mars and start afresh. The monetary system enslaves us, resources are abundant, the thought otherwise also enslaves us. Unknown land is highly likely abundant and hidden from us, the notion of a ball earth enslaves our mind, opening the doors to our current way of life, which we seem thankful for due to all the lies about our history and how bad it was. Of course there have been very harsh times in the past, but we are forgetting the hidden civilizations that thrived from free, clean energy and produced technologies that, among many other things, built the pyramids and turned deserts into a lush green, fertile lands. Free clean energy is available, polluting our air is only killing us and not the world. So-called global warming is clearly a lie, and in fact has been proven to be a lie, though this is yet again suppressed like everything else. Notice how now they don't say global warming anymore, they call it climate change. Well, of course the climate is bloody changing, it always has and always will. A study showed that the CO2 levels produced by human activity is 0.1% of the overall CO2 levels in our atmosphere, and in fact as recent as on 1,000 years ago, way before we were producing so much CO2, the levels were much higher, and guess what, the world was fine. If you don't believe that, then believe that the single biggest human contribution to CO2 levels is actually farming animals for food consumption. The big lie on climate change simply walks in hand with the resources scare tactics, as it allows them to raise prices, increase tax and achieve funding for whatever else they are plotting. Did you know that in 2016, the United States Congress could not confirm the whereabouts of over $2 trillion? Or over a period of a decade, they simply had no clue where the money had gone, yet these tactics continue, which feed their hidden agendas. Hunger and famine, crime and greed, are all unnecessary, in a world where all things necessary to thrive peacefully, exist for free. So the conclusion is that for the elites and sadistic hierarchies' efforts they gain a self-sufficient, self-reproducing race of slaves. Seems harsh, but it is true. Many questions are left unanswered, and questions yet to be discovered will join the queue. You have to do your own research to fully understand these topics. Please do so with an open mind and help find the truth about this amazing special place where we live. Don't be so quick to ridicule the things you know nothing about. After all, up until this point, we have been forcefully told what to believe. Start thinking for yourselves and trust your senses. To recap, 9/11 was an inside job, we never went to the moon, the Jewish banksters have taken over the world even though we have no need for money, the Earth is actual. Why flat and space isn't real, dinosaurs never existed, UFOs are probably our own governments carrying out sadistic experiments on the population, the technology of which was stolen from lands beyond the poles by people that live the way we could be, veganism is the way forward and our true way of life. Free and clean energy exist, vaccinations causes higher levels of birth defects, miscarriages and autism, science is a religion and almost everything you were taught is a lie. That about sums it up. Have a good day, take care now, bye bye then.